Good morning, everybody, on this gorgeous Thursday morning here in Nashua, New Hampshire. My name's Pastor George Ruish, and it is a joy to be with all of you this morning as we are going to wrap up Miracle Week here on 15 Minutes of Grace. We've had an opportunity to look at a few different miracles of Jesus throughout the Gospels. And this morning we're going to look at something a little bit different. You know, we looked at the raising of Jairus' daughter, the healing of the woman with the bleed, that Jesus calmed the storms. We've seen a lot of different big miracles of Jesus. Today I wanted to pivot a little bit and look at a miracle that you may not have ever even noticed in the Bible, and that's the healing of Malchus. So we're going to look at something a little bit different, and I'm excited to share that with you. But before we get to that, let's start with our greeting this morning. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So, if you're a longtime viewer of our show here, you know that we like to have you tell me something good. So there in the chat box, you can share anything that you'd like that's going on in your life that's positive and uplifting that you'd like to share with the group. And when we get to the end of the show, I'll circle back and share that with the group as best I can, although I will admit that sometimes I do miss things in the chat box. So if that's ever happened to you, if I've ever missed something that you've shared, my apologies. I try to look through the chat box and figure out which things are the something goods, and sometimes I miss. So, as I mentioned, today's miracle is the healing of Malchus. And you may... First of all, when I say that, you may ask, well, who is Malchus, right? So let's look at, we're going to do two readings, but the two readings are actually talking about the same event. And as I read them, I think you'll figure out pretty quick why I wanted to include both of them. So first I'm going to read here from John chapter 18, and then I'm going to go to Luke 22. So let me read here from John chapter 18. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "Of those whom you gave me I have lost not one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" So John's gospel is actually the only gospel where we get those details, that the servant's name was Malchus, and that Peter's the one that struck his ear. And then we're going to look here at Luke 22. While he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. So did you catch there that in Luke's account we actually got different information? He doesn't mention the name of the servant, and he doesn't mention the name of which disciple struck the ear, but he's the only one who includes the healing. And so as a result, this is a miracle that that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. But my purpose in bringing it up here is because throughout this week, my goal with highlighting these miracles was to give us a clearer picture about who Jesus really is. We saw how Jesus is God, that he has the power of his voice to rebuke the wind and the waves. We saw that power. We saw Jesus as human, right? In the love that he has for people and his ability to relate to them and the compassion he has for the woman who's in trouble and the compassion he has when he goes and heals Jairus' daughter. And in this case, what we get to see in this very short miracle, again, this isn't a big drawn-out thing, and it's even in the account that Luke gives us, it's a very short miracle, right? It just says he touched his ear and healed him. But what we see here is a couple of things. Number one, we see Jesus submitting to the Father's will. Now, his disciples were willing to fight for him. As he was being betrayed, before he was crucified, his disciples were willing to fight for him, and even went as far as to cut off this guy's ear. But Jesus actually says, no, we're not going to do that. This is the way it has to be. Because that's Jesus' commitment to his mission to save humanity, is that even though he has people who are willing to fight for him, he tells them not to. And then furthermore, and the thing that I really wanted to highlight with this text, is the fact that when Jesus says to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you, we hear those words and they tend to bounce off of us, right? We hear those words and we kind of nod along and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But how often do we really pray for our enemies? And when I say pray for our enemies, I mean praying for our enemies that good things would happen for them. Not just that they would, get their heads on straight and stop bothering us, although maybe that's part of the prayer, but to actually wish them well. That the Christian life is supposed to be marked by being different than the world. And what the world says is, love your friends and hate your enemies. Love the people that are good to you, your family, your friends. Be good to them, they're good to you. And then your enemies who are out there, you should wish them, ill, right? You should fight them, you should destroy them. But in this one little miracle, what we see is Jesus really living out that teaching of loving your enemies. That when his disciple steps up and puts himself out there and tries to fight on Jesus' behalf, Jesus not only tells him to stop, but then he also heals the man, puts his ear back on, uses his divine power to help someone who is actively trying to hurt him. And I realize that for us as Christians, that's a tall order. There's a lot of things in Christianity that when I tell people what Jesus teaches, I say it knowing how hard it is. Praying for our enemies is a hard thing to do. In my own life, I have found, though, that when I'm really mad at someone, when I'm really upset and frustrated, as happens to all of us, if I can force myself to really, truly pray for that person, that hardened heart becomes soft. And all of a sudden, I start to see things from their perspective. I start to have a sensitivity toward them that I didn't before. Because a lot of times we get into black and white thinking, good and bad. And let's be honest, most of the time we're on the good side, at least in our minds. Because we know why we do the things we do. And we don't always know why other people do the things that they do. And so our temptation then is to assume that we're doing everything we're doing for the best possible reason, and they're doing everything they're doing for the worst possible reason. But the act of actually praying for someone who is your enemy of one stripe or another, there's an amazing transformative power to it that can really bring us closer to God, closer to them, and give us an understanding that allows us to see things from their perspective in a way we wouldn't have before. And so that I wanted to highlight this miracle as an opportunity to actually see Jesus practicing what he preaches. That when he says love your enemies, this is the kind of thing he means. This man is clearly his enemy, right? He's there to arrest him. And yet the compassion and the love that Jesus has for all people, not just for those who follow him or those who wish him well, the love he has for all people drives him to display this power, this healing power. And I wanted to highlight that because I thought that was really cool. And also to point out the fact that the gospel writers kind of recorded a little bit different pieces of the event, so that if you hadn't ever really paid attention to that healing aspect to the ear, I wanted to share that with you. And I hope that in your own life, when you're confronted with enemies, with people who you believe wish you ill, that you take the opportunity to pray for them. Just 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Really sit down and pray for them. And you'll be amazed at what the Spirit can do in that moment to give you wisdom and to show you with new eyes exactly maybe why they're doing what they're doing. And it humanizes them. It takes you out of that black and white thinking to see things in a different shade of gray. I'm going to go back and check out our Something Goods. I see a lot of activity in our chat box, so I'm going to bring that up here. So Caroline says, I love Jesus' miracles that Daddy talks about. Judy says, another gorgeous day. Yes, it is. Ridge says, Blake had his first physical therapy appointment today for his arm and it went very well. Hey, that's great. I'm glad that that's going well, Blake. Physical therapy can be kind of painful, so we'll pray God's blessings on you as you go through that. Melinda says, our grandson Drew arrives this Saturday and will be staying until the end of June. UCLA's loss, our gain. Well, that's awesome, Melinda. I'm glad you get to spend that time with them. Larry, it's good to see you in the box there. Something good. Doctor said Alice did not have a heart attack. We'll get more answers from her primary. Hey, praise the Lord, Larry. We were praying for her yesterday, and I'm glad that she's feeling okay, and that she didn't have a heart attack there. And Lori says, our friend who was in the COVID unit in an induced coma since early April was moved out of the COVID unit to an ICU a few days ago. Sat up, was able to Zoom a bit with the family. Long way to recovery. Yeah, that's a long road, Lori, but we're certainly thankful that things seem to be moving in the right direction, and our prayers will continue for your friend. Thank you for sharing that with us. Well, my friends, I hope you've enjoyed Miracles Week here on 15 Minutes of Grace, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Same time, same place, Monday to Thursday at 10 a.m. Don't forget, Pastor Stecker has a Bible study at 1 o'clock this afternoon that I encourage you all to tune into, and you can chat with him about that while the program's going if you have any questions. Again, pray for all of you to have a blessed weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. The Lord be with you.